Now, our next keynote speaker, we will turn our heads to the digital world as Erlend Seilskjær has joined us via Zoom from Norway. Hello, can you hear us also?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect, we can hear you, we can see you, and your slides also. So Erlend has been in the team of FutureBuilt for some years now. Already we heard that our deputy mayor really is a fan of FutureBuilt, so am I. I met the people from there also in the Urban Future Forum some years ago, but a lot has been happening in many years and you have a lot of pilots. I think it's more than 70 even, so I hope you will go through all of them, right?
I'm afraid we don't have the time for that.
Anyway, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for your invitation. I had the pleasure to meet a few of you in May when you came to Oslo, and that was a thrill. So I wish I could be with you in Tallinn today because it looks really cozy. Yeah, so I work for FutureBuilt in Norway, and since it's a bit of a strange creature, I think I should explain it in a minute or two because I don't really know of any similar innovation programs in other countries. So what we do is that we try to bring up green pilots in collaboration with different developers. So we try to find the most ambitious stakeholders there are in the market, and we go into co-work with them. And we seek to have a large variety in what we do, so that we get different kinds of projects. So we do, for instance, public and private. We do big and small, and not to mention high tech and low tech, because we think it's very important to show green solutions for all of those buildings. And then we emphasize that innovation need to be a part of every project, so that we break new ground, so to speak, every time we build something. And the intention is to sort of inspire or educate the rest of the building sector, and therefore we do have a lot of seminars. We invite for visits on construction sites. We do courses digitally and physically, and a lot of workshops where we dig into specific topics. And everything we do is freely available and openly available. That is very important for us. So most is in Norwegian though, so I don't know if you could make much use of it, unfortunately. So we work in 9 different municipalities around in Norway, and we cover the 4 major cities in Norway, plus the surrounding municipalities in some of those metropolitan areas. And unfortunately, we are not able to work outside these municipalities at the moment, but we're hoping to expand eventually. But today I'm asked to speak about circular construction. So if you will allow me, I'll start with a backdrop. This is the Norwegian map that you see, and this happens all over the world. Nature is eaten out piece by piece, and at a scaring pace. So we lose a lot of areas each and every day and every hour, and Norway is no exception. So the construction sector is, of course, partly to blame for this, partly due to what we actually built. But today I will focus on the building materials that we build from. And guess what? The building materials are extracted from nature in Norway or elsewhere. We are even starting to run out of many of the most used materials within construction, such as glass, sand, and clean water. It's therefore of great importance to keep the materials in the loop in buildings as long as possible. We also have an enormous waste problem. So in Norway, the building sector produces about 1/3 of the national waste, and much of that waste is building components that would be perfectly usable in buildings. So we owe to find new ways to work in order to prevent this. But of course, we should also find ways to extract new products from the waste so that we no longer just burn or deposit the waste like we've done in the past. And the third big reason for me is the climate changes that are already happening. By reusing building materials, we save a lot of CO2, often more than 90% compared to using virgin materials. And the other good news is that reuse also gives an instant effect on climate. And as you know, we have little time to lose. So it's about time now that we really get reuse going and scale it up. So what I'm trying to say in total is that there are many good reasons for doing reuse and circular buildings. It's not only about one of these important ecological topics. I just wanted to show you this slide of all the different criteria sets that we work with in FutureBuilt. So today I will focus on circular buildings, but as you can see, we also work on a lot of other different important topics. So hopefully I can come back some other time and speak about that. I just wanted to show you this graph that we made for climate reduction in our buildings. This is a model that we've made in FutureBuilt called FutureBuilt Zero, and it shows the quite dramatic transition that the building sector is going through if we are to meet the obligations of the Paris Agreement. So that is the orange line that you see on the top, showing the reduction down to 90 to 95% in 2050. And we're not even close to move toward that line in Norway today. And therefore, it's challenging for the developers that we work with, that the FutureBuilt pilots, they should lie on below the yellow line. That means that they should be twice as good as the general building sector, and they should lie 10 years ahead. So that is sort of our intention to find and test out the solution that can be useful for the rest of the building sector in the coming years. So in circular buildings, we use the waste hierarchy that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And we should, of course, then try to keep on top of the pyramid as much as possible. And the most important and the most boring effort we can do is really to reduce. And in our sector, that means that we should preserve a lot more buildings, and we should be very careful to demolish buildings. Sometimes we do, and then we have to move further down the pyramid to reuse. And that means, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but I just wanted to explain so that we are sort of, so that we agree on the terms. When I say reuse, I mean that we're taking out a component, using it more or less as it is. So you could use a door as a door, for instance, but you could also do what we call upcycling and, for instance, turn the door into a shelf. That would also sort as reuse in my book. Whereas recycle is when you grind up the door and make something completely different, like wood chipboard, for instance. So that is not as efficient. Of course, recycling is an important part of the circular economy, but it's not as efficient as reuse, because you have to degrade the material quality and you add a lot of energy consumption each and every time you recycle the product. So therefore, we prefer reuse. And then we have this thing called heat recovery, which is not really a part of the circular economy because the materials get lost. So we don't want that to happen, nor do we like landfill. So that's not a part of the future solutions. So a bit inspired on the FutureBuilt Zero graph that I showed you, we have developed this sort of opposite tool. It's called FutureBuilt Circular, and that is a roadmap that leads us to almost 100% circularity in 2050, which is very important. So what we see in the first project is those dots on your left. We see that the rehab and the transformation projects, they are performing very well, whereas the new built buildings, they are not as sophisticated yet. And that is probably much because this is a very new way to work. So we're not that advanced at new buildings of old materials yet, but we are really working on it. So I think we could start to do our new buildings also in the dark blue part of the scheme within a short time. So this is just the dashboard of the circularity calculator that we have developed. That is, as you can see, also available in English, so you could test out your own projects if you would like to. So we divide here into present measures and future measures, where the present is the most important, as the future is very unpredictable, and we don't really know if we will have an environmental effect of reusing materials in the future. So therefore we say that preserving buildings and reuse of materials is the most important. But then of course you also get some points, so to speak, for using surplus materials from the industry, or you could use recycled materials, which is also very important. And all in all, this sums up and it's weighted, and the number you see on the dark green bar would be sort of your circularity index for your project. And that number should, of course, be higher and higher for every year as we go along. So reuse, it can be very simple, but it's much about adapting our mindset into to reusing materials instead of buying new. Much of the technical equipment that we see is very easy to reuse. It's most times ventilation equipment like this is just circulating water and air, and it doesn't really wear out. So you could use it time after time very easily, but still it's very seldom done. You also see a case here of ceramic tiles. They're not actually reused, but they are surplus tiles that were given us from the manufacturer that had this surplus storage. We have paving stones, for instance, and you can see we've put them down a bit apart in order to help us with drainage and water treatment, and also have some biological diversity on a bike parking path. We have the metal mesh that you see at your bottom left. It used to be a gear from a technical room that was installed as a railing instead. And so I mean, it's very easy to find ways to reuse materials, but I think we as architects need to be a little creative on finding new ways to use the old materials and to make nice architecture out of it. So in this case, we, for instance, made this pavilion with old ventilation ducts that we used for roofing. And in this case, we used roof pans as facade for another small pavilion. And usually we don't do projects of this small scale, But I think it's fun, and it's a great opportunity to test out new solution, as the risk is very low compared to larger scales. And in this case, we only bought screws and nails. Everything else was taken from existing buildings. And then we have this old barn that was to be replaced with a modern replica due to preservation issues. So instead of demolition, we disassembled the building as carefully as we could. It was a bit dangerous, so actually the part in the most poor condition was more or less demolished. But we managed to get a lot of timber out of it, and we could build the new replica using a lot of old materials from the barn. So we had construction wood, we had the bricks and natural stones, for instance. And we also harvested materials from other buildings that we made this new barn from. And eventually we had a lot of surplus wood when we were finished building, and then we donated the materials to another pilot that we're working with. It's this project that we are doing in an outdoor museum in Oslo. So now you can see that the traditional timber frame construction is coming up with the old timber that was used in the barn. And for the shortest wood members, we ended up with quite small bits, and then we used them for a cordwood wall for the outer walls. So here we just dig up clay from the construction pit as we build, and we use that to mason up the cordwood with. So that is very sufficient use of the local resources, of course, but it's also almost a zero waste construction, because you could use tiny bits of wood into a wall. And it's a traditional outer wall that actually performs pretty well in terms of building physics. So I think that's also an interesting thing about it. So besides being a professional workshop for the museum, this building will be used to teach craft techniques to kids and to artisans. So we try to showcase the circular principles that we see in vernacular architecture, because this knowledge, it's not new, it's just been lost for a couple of decades. But if you look at buildings like this, they knew it all back in the days. So they had well-known materials, they had local materials, non-toxic materials, and all the members are easily replaceable and detachable. So we need to find back to that traditional knowledge. When it comes to reduce global warming, we must look into the heavy materials, and that is where we see a lot of the carbon is embodied. So for instance, brick is a very interesting material, also architecturally, because it's a material that really age with style. So it's often much more beautiful the second or third time you use it. But then, of course, you need to know how to do it and to use soft mortars so that it's easy to take the bricks apart, so that we don't sort of pull out the ladder after us and crack the bricks the next time we want to use them. And we've also worked a lot with the steel and concrete construction. And the steel has proven to be not very, but at least quite easy to work with for reuse, whereas concrete has been a puzzle. And we are still working on it, but we have developed a national standard now for reusing hollow core slabs in building. So that is very important, and it's a very good start. But of course, we need to make it as cheap and as attractive as using virgin elements. And we're almost there after a couple of years now. And if we're able to scale up this, we could really save a lot of greenhouse gases from the building sector. And those of you that came to Oslo will probably recognize this place. It's called Circular Resource Central. And that has been a really important facility for us in Oslo. So now we have 5,000 square meters inside this tent and 5,000 square meters outside that we use for intermediate storage and warehouse for reused materials. Infrastructure like this is crucial to scale up reuse and to establish well-functioning marketplaces. So we are still in a sort of trial phase, but I think already after 1.5 years, it's quite a success, and we're hoping to spread this out to other cities as well, so that they could have their local markets. So here we have a social housing project from the 70s. So this is a sort of before and after image. It's a typical 70s building with the lousy energy performance. As you can see, you have the concrete ribs that are going out as very efficient thermal bridges. So it was very hard to keep warm in winter. And what we did was that we took and made sort of a new outer coat and also integrated the old balconies into the building with a new facade. And we installed a solar panel and upgraded the ventilation system. And the result of this was that we managed to have an energy reduction of some 70% in the building. And that taps directly into the electricity bill for the dwellers. So that is really fortunate. And I could also mention that we managed to do the entire construction while the building was inhabited by the residents. So that was an interesting case. But since we were working mostly on the outside, that was possible. So this is the first circular building that we made in Norway. That was in 2020, and that gave us a good chance to experiment with all kinds of reuse in a sort of medium-size building. So here we harvested materials from 25 different buildings in the Oslo area. And the project is both a retrofit of a 1950s office building, but it's also an extension using reused materials. All in all, we saved 70% CO2 from the material side of the building due to the reuse strategies. So here you see the hollow core slabs are coming into place. So the plot was so narrow, so we had to borrow a crane from the neighbors in nighttime in order to get this done. But now it's also our office in FutureBuilt. So we're taking a lot of pride in that building as a sort of a Norwegian pioneer on its field. And this is another neighboring project that I wanted to show. It's has a circularity index of 70%, and much of the building was listed. So we had to make a lot of effort to maintain the facade and the original character of the building, which I think is quite fortunate also for the architecture. So in this case, for instance, we used the beautiful teak frames at the windows that you see, and we fitted in new windows in order to meet the energy requirements. So in that case, we both got to keep the beautiful old woodwork at the same time as we had modern window standards, more or less. I think the building has been sort of a nice combination between a beautiful historical building, but also a functional modern office building with all the facilities that is required. And I also wanted to show you this project we are working on currently in Bergen. It's also based on 2 existing buildings that are built together in the project, and here they aim for a reuse of 100%. So that means that they're not supposed to buy anything new. They say now that they have collected around 90% of what they need for the building phase. The last meeting I had with them, they asked about good solution for reuse of screws and glue. So they're really into the pudding now and taking this seriously. And of course, it's not the most important thing in the world to reuse your screws and the glues, but it's still very interesting to push the limits and to find new ways to overcome this very linear economy that we're used to. So we also have a project in Drammen that is a city 30 minutes west of Oslo. We are very happy there not to work merely with a singular building, but with an entire block. That means that we're able to harvest components from various buildings and utilize the resources more efficient than we could in a building. And of course, this is not only about the building materials, it's also very important for other sustainability topics such as mobility, energy, health, biodiversity, and not to mention water treatment and ecology. So in this case, some of the old buildings are preserved, some are transformed, and some are dismantled. And through a careful mapping, we are hoping now to be able to use the materials within the block for transformation, but also for new structures. So at least we will manage to reuse the hollow core slabs, the concrete slabs. I'm sorry about the Norwegian slide. We could use the bricks and aluminum sheets for facades. We have a lot of timber construction. And then from there comes all the different parts with the smaller bits and pieces that is taken out of the buildings. But we're trying to make use of it all. And this is how we wish that the block eventually may look. As you can see, we try to maintain the rhythm and the scale of a small town block, adding new qualities in between, so to speak. And please note that there is no car parks in the area. So now we try to find more reused materials that we could use. The market in Drammen is not mature yet, so perhaps we need to go to Oslo and buy the materials from there. We'll see. But we also hope that this could be a vehicle to build up a reuse facility in Drammen as well. So we hope that within some years, all cities with respect for themselves should have its own reuse facility. The last project I wanted to show you is this industrial building that sits next to the main railroad station in Oslo. So this is our attempt to take circularity into a new scale. This is a very ugly building, as you can see, and it also isolates the eastern side of the city from the railroad station, and it's enormous and a very simple structure, but it contains a lot of concrete and a lot of embodied carbon. So we're speaking here about 40,000 cubic meters worth of concrete. So you do the math. And in order to illustrate this, I usually say that just driving out the demolition waste from this structure, and that's the load-bearing structure alone, it would require 3,000 lorries to the city center. So it was really important for us to convince the client to save the structure instead of demolition. And now we've managed, and this is what we're hoping to do, so that we keep the concrete structure at the bottom, and we erect 2 new high-risers coming through on the top. So thereby we manage to keep all the embodied carbon that is built into the concrete, but we also strengthen the hub for green mobility, being next to the railroad station. And if there's one place we could defend building high-risers in Oslo, it must be at this point. So we will also develop the roof into a 5,000 square meters garden. So I hope the next time you come to Oslo, you could come and wait for your train on this roof with a nature imitation. We'll see. These are at least some sketches, and here you see that we are sort of lifting the skirts of the old facade and pulling back and carve out chunks of the old building in order to allow street life to run into the building, and we make a new entryway into the railroad station to open up the urban situation, and of course a massive bike park that is necessary. So I hope that will be a couple of years, of course, that you could come and wait for your train here in central Oslo. And as my very last slide, I wanted to show a project that is not our own, but it's still a sort of a personal favorite of mine, because we often see simple old industrial buildings being transformed into beautiful modern architecture. But this is sort of the other way around. So I think it's quite inspiring to see very beautiful, elaborated architecture being transformed into something very prosaic, such as this gymnasium. This used to be Brooklyn Paramount Theater in America, and has had different uses, but for some years it served as a gymnasium. And to me, that sort of illustrates that old buildings, they can take just whatever you throw at them. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Alan. I think this last slide really would put some dead architects turn in their graves, as well saying it. But that's really the change of aesthetics that we're talking about, and that Christian also mentioned. It's happening. I have one question. Would you also describe on the FutureBuilt model, how does it work? How did you choose the municipalities, or they chose you? And how do you support the pilots in real life?
Yeah, good question. No, actually, it was we were people working in the Norwegian Association of Architects. So we did a similar architecture exhibition on green architecture, and it was wood architecture we worked with at the time, back in 2008. And we found it so interesting and sort of successful to work with pilots, that we wanted to do the same in a larger scale and in a larger urban context. So therefore we came up with what turned into FutureBuilt. And what we try to do is to give them professional aid, so that we connect the project with experts and make all our knowledge available to them. But it's really the project that have to do a lot of extra effort and to pay their own consultants to develop the project. So we're just a small support, but that's why we need to work with the most ambitious and motivated people.
So it's amplifying the ambition of certain people and actors. Any questions from the public? We are here already anticipating a break with some snacks and coffee, but still some time for a question. Oh, I have a hand up.
Hi, I was curious about the project where you were working with the full city block, and especially how you or the project approached the.
I think we lost Alan for a second, or can you hear us?
Yeah, now I hear you.
Okay,
please, okay,
again.
I will start again. Yeah, so I was curious about the project where you were working with the full city block, and how you or the project approached the scheduling between the different sites. So the demolition, or maybe rather unbuilding of some buildings, and refurbishing the material for new use, and then the new construction, and if parts of the block were able to function while all of this was happening.
Well, the boring answer is that it's not being built yet, so it's a bit early to say. But we're working a lot on it, and it's also some issues about the ground condition. We have quite difficult conditions, and that is also partly why we need to demolish some of the buildings, because we've got this quick clay underneath some of it. So it's a bit of a puzzle, but you can try to ask me again in like 2 years.
Great, I'll be back.
Could you comment a bit on using materials in the buildings? You also showed us the effect of deforestation in Norway. In Estonia, we have a political take that also it's actually a take from different people that we should build more in wood, using local materials. Logical, right? Also, it's not the heavy material with the heavy burden on the climate. What's your take on that? So it is local, but...
Yeah, don't get me started. No, I think it's a difficult discussion, because for many years we favored wood, and that was sort of where we came from in the beginning of FutureBuilt. So what we've seen lately is that, for instance, the concrete industry has managed to improve their product a lot, whereas the timber production has not really improved ecologically. So I think it's a closer race these days. So I think we should have a balanced vision and find the best suited material for each and every assignment. I don't think anyone could argue that wood is better in any case than... I mean, in some cases, wood is the best, but it's not necessarily like that in all cases. A boring answer, sorry.
Any questions? We have one question for you before we go to break.
Thank you for a beautiful presentation. There was an ongoing project that you showed, the red building. Do you know, can you explain how the foundation was done? Or will be done?
The red building is an existing building in Bergen, if we're talking about the same one.
Okay, so so the one that where you told that they are pushing limits and there's already 90% of materials. It was existing building. They didn't refurbish it with.
Yeah. So it's not like reuse in the foundations. No,
okay.
It's not.
Okay. Thanks.
But thank you, Alan. That was really inspiring. Really nice projects. I know you have even more things to show us, but we don't have time for that all, so we must visit you. What I take away is your nice quote of reuse has an instant effect on climate. That's really well put, I think. So thank you. And for people here, we're going now on a break for 20 minutes. When you're not back in 20 minutes, I will come and politely, at first, invite you back. Thanks.